Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jarvcast. It's January 2023. We got an early Jarvcast this month because I got places to go. I got people to see, things to do, and I'm sure those announcements will be coming soon. But if you've been paying attention to the Jarvcast, I'm sure you could figure out what's going on. So this is good. This is great. Football playoffs have been fun. There's some big games this weekend. Sadly, my Ravens have been knocked out of the playoffs. It was a close one. If you watched the game, came down to one big play, I think, and goal line quarterback sneak, and he put the ball up, try to get it over the line, past the line of scrimmage, and the goal line, and defensive player knocks the ball up, just punches the ball out, takes it, runs it back for 98 yards. Ravens lose. But, they didn't have their quarterback either. So, and will we ever have him again? Probably not. It was fun watching Lamar play for the Ravens. I wonder where he'll go next. My guess is the Raiders or something like that. But Super Bowl will be fun. We got not too much baseball news going on in St. Louis. The winter warm-ups just happened, where the players come out and do some autographs, meet the fans. I've been to one before. It's a good time. Music news today, Pantera announced more tour dates. Looks like in July they're going to go out with Lamb of God. Got a few Lamb of God stories. I mean, they have blown up, obviously, over the last 10 or so years. And I remember, Cast the Stone, Derek and Mark's band from Scour, they opened for Lamb of God at Pops, which was a big deal back then. But I remember right when the singer Lamb of God got out of prison, I believe it was in the Czech Republic. And if you don't know the story, I guess a fan fell from out of the stage or something and died. And he went to prison for it. And when he got out, we happened to be on tour. I was on tour with Cannibal Corpse. I was doing merch for Cannibal Corpse, and the show was in Columbus, Ohio. And the tour was Lamb of God, Hell Yeah, which was Vanny's band, if you don't know, and some others. And Vanny had an issue with playing that city because, of course, that's where the tragedy happened with Dimebag. Now, since then, I believe he has returned and played the city, but at this point he was not playing the city. So Cannibal Corpse ended up getting that slot. So it was kind of like a one-off show for Cannibal for that tour. But Randy came on the bus and basically told us the whole story, what happened and what it was like being in prison, and it was crazy, man. I mean, and I've get to hang out with him. I guess it was the Housecore Horror Fest, the one that they had in Austin, Texas. He was just hanging around and taking photos. That's what I guess it was what he likes to do on the side. But yeah, good for Pantera for getting back out there. Looks like the closest one to St. Louis is going to be Indiana, Noblesville. I think it's a little north of Indianapolis. That's cool. The more the merrier. Bring it on, Pantera. And let's see. Big music news. A lot of sad deaths recently. Jeff Beck passed away. David Crosby passed away. And we were talking last night at work about David Crosby and Crosby, Stills, Nash, and and Young. And their first show was at Woodstock, in front of 100+ thousand people. talk about some pressure there. But what a great song from that show. You know, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes is a classic. And I was talking about how really I'm more of a Neil Young guy as far as all those Neil, you know, Stills and Nash and Crosby. And it was after the Gold Rush, the record my dad gave me when I was younger, and because I think I told him I didn't like Neil Young, and he said, "Well, listen to this record," and he was right. It's just a good record. Songs like "Southern Man's" on there. I guess that's the biggest hit from the record. But it intrigued me because I'm like, all right, this song is pretty much a diss track, what they'd call that today. You know, he's Leonard Skinner and Neil Young are going back and forth in song. You know, it was it Sweet Home Alabama? Yeah, that's Neil Young. I hope Neil Young will remember that a Southern man don't need him around anyhow. That was the lyric, I believe. But yeah, they're fighting back and forth, and I mean, I love me some Leonard Skinner. And a lot of their views that they talked about in their songs, I agree with. Like, I'm not a gun guy. Neither was Skinner. They didn't like the music industry taking all their money. I'm gonna have to agree with you, Leonard Skinner. I don't like that either. Give me back my bullets. But yeah, one of the greatest American bands of all time is Leonard Skinner. Top 5. And if you could name me 5 bands from the United States better than Leonard Skinner, do it. Send it to jarvcast@gmail.com. I want to hear it. Give me 5 better bands from the United States. The Doors, maybe. The Beach Boys, maybe. I'll give it to the Doors and the Beach Boys. They were better than Skinner. Chicago's up there somewhere. But that's about it. Aerosmith, maybe. I think I would take Skinner over Aerosmith any day. But that old Aerosmith's got some good stuff. Speaking of Skinner, the Nesty Peeps are finishing up our covers record. Now, just last weekend we played a show in Springfield, Illinois with old friend Putrid Pile. Good to see Pute. Good to see Zach and the boys. Thanks for booking us. And the Nesty Peeps started tracking drums, I guess, about 3 weeks ago, and I've done the guitar and vocals for the covers record, and the bass has only just a few to go. We're going to knock that out Sunday here before I head out. And Skinner has made the covers record. I'll just give you a little track listing. So, Skinner, we did Gimme 3 Steps. And the reason I picked that one was it was a song one of my old cover bands used to play. And if the bar was just when you're playing bar gigs as a cover band, and we did 4-hour sets, a lot of times people are just there to drink. They don't care about the band. But every time we went into Gimme 3 Steps, someone would get up and start dancing. It was just a guarantee. So it was one of the big cover songs for us, and it's not the most difficult one to play and sing, and so of course I'm singing these songs in my Jarv style vocals. I'm not trying to be a singer, but Skinner was fun. Let's see, we did Nirvana's Breed off Nevermind, of course. That was obviously one of the biggest records of all time. When that record came out, I got to go back. I'm in high school, and I'm learning guitar. I'm learning from Metallica and Pantera. That's, my favorite tab books to pick up and try to learn riffs from. And some of the Nirvana riffs, you just couldn't deny them. They're just catchy and fun, and they got more of a punk rock vibe to them. But I loved it, and I loved the fact that I could just play it, and anyone could play the whole song. Even the guitar solo is not too much, because late '80s, early '90s is all about the shredders, and that's great. But I'm no Steve Vai, I'm no Reb Beach from Winger. I mean, those guys can really play. And I remember back then I met John Petrucci from Dream Theater. Me and Adam went to KC95. So it was at Union Station. They did an autograph signing during the Images and Words tour. I still got the poster autographed. And I had a nice conversation with him. I basically told him, I'm a big fan of you guys, and Steve Vai and all the hair metal, but give me some tips to improve my playing, play faster. And he basically told me, like, just find your own style. Don't try to be us. Do your own thing. And I think that's kind of what Nirvana did, and it gave people like me the confidence to start a band, to be a singer and guitar player. And you don't have to be the most technical, and you don't have to even know what you're doing, basically. You just gotta rock. And that's what Nirvana taught me. So it was nice to have that on there. We did ZZ Top, Cheap Sunglasses. Another great, and you know what? I'll throw them in the top 5, way over Aerosmith. United States rock bands, no doubt about it. ZZ Top rules. For me, it was the Eliminator album growing up, MTV videos, and how cool these guys were with the beards. And I remember, Gillette was going to pay him $1 million to shave the beards, and they wouldn't do it. And I was like, that's awesome, And I remember being at work one day and talking about ZZ Top, and someone was saying, his name was Greg Miller, rest in peace. This was a great guy, and he brought up how the newer ZZ Top sucks, and I was just kind of like, no, it doesn't. It rules. But however, I don't know much about the old stuff. I knew a couple of the KC classics, and of course Cheap Sunglasses was one of those. But he was the guy that got me into, actually going back and listening to the old ZZ Top, like Tres Hombres and stuff like that. And, I mean, they rule. ZZ Top is awesome. If you've never heard Tres Hombres, do yourself a favor, check it out. So Cheap Sunglasses made the cover record. We did Disarm by Smashing Pumpkins. Now, we didn't do the album version. We did the version that the Pumpkins played live at the Video Music Awards, MTV Video Music Awards. So it's a heavier version. And I screamed so hard on this that I almost passed out. At the end of the track, I seriously was dizzy and almost fell over because I was screaming so hard. But I'm such a big Pumpkins fan. It takes a little bit to get used to the vocals. I understand, and I know a lot of people don't like the Smashing Pumpkins because of the vocals. I'll tell a quick story about band practice. When I was younger, I was trying to get my drummer Gabe to appreciate the Pumpkins, and he just didn't like them, just hated them. Anytime they'd come on at the bar, I hate Billy Corgan, fucking hate Smashing Pumpkins. And I was trying to tell him, like, these are just the hits. You need to listen to the deep cuts, man. He's got some really good stuff, great guitar riffs, great songwriting. And I would throw in a little CD after practice with the song that I knew had a long intro, so where right off the bat he wouldn't know it was the Pumpkins. And there was a couple songs on Melancholy and The Infinite Sadness that I would play, and he would say, "Who is this band? Like, this is awesome." And every time he would say that, I'd pause it and say, "It's the Smashing Pumpkins. You love the Smashing Pumpkins, Gabe. You told me more than once now. And so I'd always trick him into getting into the Pumpkins. But the heavy version is much better. If you've never heard that, you can YouTube that. The MTV Awards, Smashing Pumpkins Disarm. Video Music Awards, the VMAs. So let's move on down the track listing. We got For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica. Now, I had to add this for a number of reasons. One reason, it's an easy one to do. We can all do it. And there's not a ripping guitar solo that I can't play or anything like that. But the song means a lot to me because it's one of the first ones I ever played with my cousin Adam. It was basically the song we're like, all right, let's get through this entire song. I'm pretty sure it's the first one we ever did where we made it through the whole song. But we must have played it 1,000 times. And Metallica is one of the biggest heavy metal bands of all time, if not the biggest. They just put out a new song yesterday. I did give it a listen. I like the first one a little bit better. But for being, 60-year-old dudes, it's still pretty good. Jailbreak by Thin Lizzy makes the cut. Now, played a show once in Dublin, Ireland, and I got to go to the Phil Lynott statue. They got he passed away, I guess, in the 80s, and they got a statue of him there, and they got a bar right next to it that we went to after the show, and they had a Thin Lizzy tribute band playing at the bar, which was cool. And I just remember the singer had the tightest leather pants. I mean, it was just hilarious. He had his bass up so high that you could see his bulge. And it was just, it had to be fake because it was like 1.5 feet long down his pants. But it was hilarious. You couldn't miss it. But that's what I remember from being in Ireland. But Thin Lizzy, another underrated band. One of the best rock bands. Let's see. You got March of the Pigs, 9 Inch Nails. Now this came about for us just at band practice. We were all 9 Inch Nails fans. Timmy and I saw 9 Inch Nails on the Downward Spiral tour. And Tim's the bass player for Nest. And Dimebag was at the show, walks into the crowd with a 6-pack of Coors Light on the floor, and gives Timmy a beer, gives him an autograph. Now, sadly, that ticket stub burned in a fire at Tim's old house, because I asked him, I was like, you still got that stub? Because, I mean, it was no denying it was really him, the pink beard, and you couldn't miss Dimebag back then. But apparently he would just go on tour with 9 Inch Nails and hang out and party in his off time, because he was such a big fan. But we were at practice, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool to play March of the Pigs? And just like that, the drummer starts playing it, and we just played it, and it was killer. So then we added it to the set that weekend, and we've played it a few times since, and here we go. Now it's on the covers record. We got Mississippi Queen by Mountain. Another heavy one. Now, Mountains, I had the Best of Mountain cassette. Actually, I had it on vinyl, too. My dad had it. But I didn't really start listening to it until I got the cassette. And it's just another great southern rock style. Now, I don't even know where Mountain was from. I have to look that up real quick. I'm going to guess Canada. Let's look it up. Mountain Band. They are a rock band from New York. Long Island, New York. How about that? So, another American rock band. Now, Aerosmith's they might get squeezed out of the top 10 by the end of this Jarvcast. Mountains got to be up there. So, Mississippi Queen, if you know what I mean. We got Sepultura's Roots Bloody Roots. Of course, Nest has been covering that one for a while. It was one that the Clenched Fist did. And I was at that show, I saw a sticker for the band End It. So they're a hardcore band from Baltimore. And I was telling the story about, hey, the guitar player from End It actually sang for Clenched Fist for a little bit. The story goes, it was a Decibel Magazine Metal Fest in Philadelphia, and Dying Fetus was the headlining band, and they got sick and had to cancel. This was the day of. Like, on the way to the show, I got a message and was telling the guys in the van, I was like, hey, Fetus ain't making it tonight. This is a big issue, you know. At that point, when the headliner cancels, it's like usually the whole show gets scrapped. But there was a lot of other, you know, big band. Nails was on the show, Misery Index, and they decide, you know, the show must go on, and they're going to try to get a very, very last minute headliner. And those were back in my drinking days, and I was tour managing Misery Index, and we were having some cocktails that day. And I remember about halfway through, I got the idea. I said, hey, Clenched Fist is basically here. We can put together a Sepultura tribute set and get some special guests that are hanging around. And, you know, once we started talking about it, next thing you know, like, people are pumped and they're saying, hey, I want to be a part of it. We had one of the old Fetus singers was there, and he joined us for Beneath the Remains. And then John Baisley from Baroness did, I think it was Slave New World with us, which was really cool. And then he did it actually after that. We came back and played Philly at probably the best show we ever did. It was at the, it was after one of those fests, and we did it at Kung Fu Necktie. Oh wait, Baisley didn't come to that one. He came to the second Kung Fu Necktie show. But the one Baisley came to was just happened to be the day Metallica was releasing Death Magnetic, and they have the same management, Baroness and Metallica. And he was texting Papa Het, and he goes, "Look, Papa," that was his exact word. "Look, Papa Het said he wishes he was here tonight." And I remember looking at Baisley and saying, "You're telling me that James Hetfield knows about this concert, and he wishes he was here? This is insane." He was in London promoting the record, but he told John Baisley he wishes he was at the Sepultura tribute show. So that was a crazy thing, you know. Think like, I can't believe the guy from Metallica even knows about our Sepultura tribute band. I mean, that's nuts. But yeah, we did that show. We ended up playing the headlining slot, and singer from End It, he's the guitar player from End It. He sang for us that night on, I mean, very short notice. He drove up from Baltimore midday. You know, it's an hour and a half drive on a busy weekend. So props to him for making that happen for us. And we ended up getting paid a lot of money that night. And I remember being like, man, we really were at the right place at the right time to save the day. And it was just a fun set, if I recall. I don't remember much because I was so drunk. But I do remember a situation with the bass player from Nails. He didn't want us to use his gear, even though he had borrowed ours. And it was just kind of like, are you serious, dude? And he got all defensive. Why would you ask me if you could borrow my head? I said, because it's on the stage and it's connected to our cabs, and it'd just be easier, you know. And obviously we don't have gear. This is a last minute thing. And normally someone at playing the show with you isn't going to have an issue with that and be a jerk about it, but this guy was. So, you know, when bands like that are jerks, you kind of just chalk it up as maybe he's having a bad day. But then when you see terrible things happen to these bands, you just kind of say, well, that's why it's happening. And it goes the opposite way too. If you're just cool Like, for example, Cannibal Corpse are nice people. They're nice. They're cool. There's a reason why they're the biggest death metal band around. If they were jerks their whole careers, they wouldn't be asked to come back to all these shows and all these venues. And so I guess my advice is just be cool, man. If someone's letting you borrow something at the show, what's the problem with them borrowing something of yours? But anyway, that was a fun night. Roots Bloody Roots is on the cover album. In the final track, Spill the Blood. Spill the Blood by Slayer. Now, Slayer's last tour, of course, happened a couple years ago. And Spill the Blood isn't the most ripping Slayer song. However, it's got one of my favorite riffs of any Slayer song. And it's another one that I knew that I could pull off. And it's fun to sing. But Slayer for me was in the 80s. I just heard about them. I'd never really listened or had the chance to listen to Slayer until, I guess, around Divine Intervention, when they were coming to town, and the opening acts were Biohazard and Machine Head. Now, this was Urban Discipline era, Biohazard, and Burn My Eyes, first record, Machine Head. And I was a fan of Biohazard, big fan, and that's why I bought the tickets. And I had a friend at school who's now my cousin, Crazy Cruiser. You know, I asked him, hey, you going to the Biohazard show? And he's like, what? I'm going to the Slayer show. It's like, oh yeah, well technically it's the Slayer show, but I'm going to see Biohazard. And he's like, what? Like, he didn't make any sense. Like, well, really? Like, you don't worship Slayer like everyone else? And I'm just like, I've never really checked them out, never really heard them. And that show, I went down up front for Biohazard, and I remember getting crushed into the front and center to where, you can't breathe for about 30 seconds, and then you use every bit of power you can just to get a little short breath. So it was pretty scary, probably the scariest pit I was ever in. And I remember Slayer's about to play, and the looks on everyone's faces, I was like, I'm fucking out of here. I'm going back up to the seats. Like, I want no part of this. And it was just violent mosh pits. I mean, Slayer fans, I learned that night, are a different breed of people. They're just insane. And after that show, I was a Slayer fan for life. I mean, I'd never seen anything so intense. And I remember going back to school and talking to some people, and there was a friend that his older brother was really into metal and into good music like us, and the older brother basically said, well, Slayer's the best. I mean, they got the best drummer, they got the best guitar players, they got the heaviest songs. And he was right, man. They were the shit. And Divine Intervention gets a lot of flack from Kerry King and maybe other Slayer fans, but I suggest you go back and listen to that record, because every song's awesome on it. So many killer riffs. So I'm glad I got to represent Slayer on the Covers record. We will finish up the bass this weekend, get it mixed and mastered as soon as possible, and I got a little plan on how to release it, but we'll see. We'll get that out this year one way or another, I'm sure. And I gotta be honest, it's just fun to listen to. I've been listening to it the last few days, just a quick mix that I made, and I just laugh listening, because some parts are just so bad that they're good, you know what I mean? Like, kind of like the Graveyard Classics by 6 Feet Under, where he's singing heavy over, all the cover songs, and they did Back in Black, hit the set, like, it sounded pretty cool, actually. And it's just fun to listen to. So I hope you get to check that out some point. And I think I'll tell a quick story from the show. Had a kid come up and ask me, are you John Jarvis, blah, blah, blah. And had a nice long chat, and him and his friend, and towards the end of it, he said something that I just couldn't accept. He said, I hate Quicksand, the band Quicksand. And when you're chatting with someone you just met, and you don't want to call them out and be like, hey, wait a minute, enough. But luckily, the band next to us, the singer said, hey, man, I love Quicksand. And I was like, you know what, me too. And I had to jump in and be like, you know what, Quicksand's one of the best. Maybe you should give them another chance. And I was actually wearing, under my Malignancy long sleeve, I was wearing a Quicksand t-shirt, and I had to actually pull up the shirt to prove to the kid, like, hey, I really love this band. Give them another chance. And when you're caught talking trash and someone hears you, and you're kind of like trying to back off and backtrack, and it was just kind of funny. And it reminded me of the story of when I was in, where were we? We were at some festival. I want to say it was it Hellfest? No, it was one of those fests in the UK. But anyway, we're in the UK. I'm down at the hotel eating breakfast. And one night was Agoraphobic Nosebleed, and the next night was Pig Destroyer. And so I was playing both nights. And this was after the Agoraphobic show the next morning. It was the singer from the band Razor. He comes down, sits down. He's like, hey, man, man, I saw this band last night. They were terrible. They had no drummer. There's some girl singer, and she sounded like shit. Like, he was just ripping Agoraphobic to shreds to me. And I was like, at the end of it, he was like, so did you see that? I was like, you just described my band. Like, there's no other band last night that you could have been talking about. You're talking about the Agoraphobic Nosebleed. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I could have, maybe it was the mix, the sound guy maybe he could have turned up the guitars or something. I'm just like, it's too late, man. And we just had a laugh. Like, you're so busted, dude. You're talking shit to me about my band. And it was just, we became friends because of that. It was just so funny. He was just like, man, I've never, like, put my foot in my mouth like that before, But sometimes, when you're talking trash, you better watch out who you're talking to. And that's why it's best to just not do it. Just don't be a hater. If you don't like something, just keep it to yourself. I got an idea. Tell me about what you do like. Instead of telling me that you don't like Quicksand, tell me that you liked the Gorilla Biscuits or you liked Rival Schools. But that's my advice this week, I guess, on the Jarvcast. Sorry I did it a little early, but like I said, got places to go. Maybe you'll hear a little bit about that next month on the Jarvcast. Thanks for listening. Have a good one, everyone. Cheers.